Tycoon left his pregnant wife for a younger woman. 3 years later, he meets his son. It was a golden afternoon, the kind that casts long, honeyed shadows across the tall windows of a mansion that had once been built not just for wealth, but for love. Inside, the world was quiet. The soft tick of the grandfather clock in the corner was the only sound that kept time company. The scent of jasmine from the garden floated through the air, mingling with the vague aroma of antique books and polished mahogany. Claire stood in the hallway, her fingers gently grazing the frame of a wedding photo on the wall. She looked younger in the picture, glowing with that innocent joy only the newly married possess. Beside her, Ethan wore a quiet, handsome confidence, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his eyes filled with promise. But that picture, like so many others in this house, belonged to a different time. Now, Claire's hand trembled as she traced the edge of the frame. Her other hand rested lightly on her stomach, not yet showing, but growing with life. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind for days. Maybe over dinner, she had thought. Maybe with music playing, like the night we celebrated our first anniversary. But something inside her whispered, he's not the same anymore. Ethan had been distant lately, not cruel, not yet, but cold, as if some invisible wall had slowly risen between them. He came home later and later. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now never left his side. His kisses were absent-minded, his eyes distracted. Still, Claire clung to hope. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her heart skip. She placed the photo back carefully and smoothed her blouse, suddenly conscious of the slight bulge beneath the fabric. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Today's the day." Moments later, Ethan stepped inside, his custom-tailored suit still perfect, his tie slightly loosened. He was every bit the man the world admired, sharp, successful, magnetic. But Claire no longer saw admiration in his eyes when he looked at her, only obligation. "Hey," she said softly, stepping forward with a smile she hoped looked natural. "You're home early." He nodded, barely glancing her way. Board meeting was canceled. Claire followed him to the kitchen, where he poured himself a glass of water like a man on autopilot. She watched him in silence, noting how he didn't ask how her day had been, how he didn't even take off his shoes, something he used to do the moment he walked in. "I was thinking we could have dinner on the patio tonight," she tried. "It's warm outside, and I made your favorite rosemary chicken." "I already ate," he said flatly, not looking at her. Her smile faltered. She hesitated for a beat before trying again. "Ethan, there's something I want to tell you." He turned around then, finally meeting her eyes. But his expression was unreadable. "What is it?" Claire inhaled deeply, her heart racing. "I'm pregnant." Silence. For a moment, it was as if the air had been sucked from the room. She waited, for his smile, for his arms, for the warmth she remembered. But none of it came. Ethan blinked slowly, like the words didn't quite register. Then he set his glass down with a quiet, deliberate clink. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice a shade colder than she expected. Claire nodded, her voice a whisper now. "Yes, I took the test twice. I wanted to wait until the right moment to tell you, but I couldn't hold it anymore." He turned away, rubbing his jaw. This isn't good timing." Her heart cracked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're not in the place for this, Claire." His voice was suddenly sharper. "You know how complicated things are right now. I've got the merger coming up, the investment deals, and—" He stopped himself. Claire stepped forward, her voice shaking. "This isn't a business decision, Ethan. This is our child." He looked at her then, truly looked, but there was no joy in his eyes, only frustration. "I can't do this right now," he muttered, stepping back. Her breath caught. "Ethan?" But he was already walking toward the living room, his hands running through his hair. She followed, her stomach nodding. "What's happening to us?" she cried. "We used to dream about this. You told me you wanted a family. You told me we'd raise them in this house." He turned, his eyes dark. "That was before everything got so dull." Her world froze. "Dull? I feel trapped, Claire, he burst out. Every day is the same. You're always home, always waiting. I can't breathe here anymore. I didn't sign up for a life where every moment is scheduled around domestic bliss. She was speechless, staring at the man who now looked like a stranger. You're seeing someone, she whispered. He didn't deny it. Claire's knees nearly buckled, but she held herself up, her voice trembling. Who is she? He looked away. Her name's Ivy. We met at a fundraiser. She reminds me of who I used to be. Claire swallowed the rising nausea. Her vision blurred, but not from tears, from betrayal. I loved you, she whispered. I believed in you, in us. I know, he said softer now. And I'm sorry, but I can't stay in a marriage that doesn't make me happy. I can't fake it anymore. Her hand went to her stomach again, protectively. You're walking away from your child. He paused. I'll support it financially, he said coldly. But I can't be part of this. I'm not ready. Claire's tears finally fell. Not the loud, dramatic kind. They were quiet and slow, like rain falling on a broken roof. The kind that leaves stains even after they dry. Ethan picked up his coat, walked to the door, and hesitated for a second, just long enough for Claire to hope. But he said nothing more, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. The silence in the mansion now felt unbearable. Claire stood there, alone in a house full of memories, with a baby growing inside her and the taste of abandonment thick on her tongue. She looked down at her stomach, her hands trembling. I'll protect you, she whispered, even if I have to do it alone. In the upstairs room, baby clothes she had ordered weeks ago were still folded neatly in a drawer, untouched by the war that had now erupted in her marriage. She stared blankly at the wall, replaying Ethan's words over and over like a cruel echo. I feel trapped. I can't fake it anymore. But he had faked it for months, and somewhere out in the world he wasn't faking anymore. Not with her. Ivy wore her confidence like silk, smooth, expensive, and designed to be touched. Her laughter spilled effortlessly into the private VIP lounge of the rooftop bar, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders like waves in a perfume commercial. She leaned across the table, eyes locked on Ethan, who sat across from her with a drink in hand, but a storm in his soul he was too proud to show. Still thinking about her? She asked, one brow arched, lips curled into a slight smile. You always get that haunted look when you're not here with me. Ethan exhaled slowly, shaking his head. It's not that simple, isn't it? She said, sipping her wine. You made your choice, didn't you? He looked away. Ivy leaned in, her tone softer now. You don't have to pretend. I'm not going to compete with a ghost. But if you're not all in with me... She let the words hang in the air like a blade. Ethan looked back at her, eyes tired. I don't regret leaving her, he lied. I was suffocating. Claire didn't see me anymore. She saw a version of me that existed only in her dreams. Ivy smiled again, slow and knowing. That's because you were never meant to be a husband. Not really. He didn't answer, but the silence spoke for him. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this life, this glittering electric world of champagne flutes, red carpets, and spontaneous flights to Milan, was freedom. But something inside him still pulled, like a cord that hadn't been cut cleanly. A waitress passed by. Ivy leaned back, her hand finding Ethan's under the table, cool and soft. Let me take you away from all this, she murmured. Let's disappear this weekend. Just the two of us. Where? He asked, already knowing he'd say yes. Seoul. I know a designer who owes me a favor. You could use the distraction. Ethan forced a smile and nodded, but a quiet unease settled in his chest. Claire was still out there, pregnant, alone. Meanwhile, Claire moved like a ghost through the house, cleaning, folding, preparing. Her mother called daily, her voice laced with concern. But Claire always said the same thing. I'm fine, really. But she wasn't. She talked to the baby when no one was around. Hi, little one, she whispered one morning, standing at the window, watching the first snow fall. "I think you're a boy. I don't know why. I just feel it." Her hand rubbed gently over her belly. "Your daddy's not here. He chose something else. Someone else. But you and me will be okay." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she kept talking. Talking made it real. Talking reminded her that she wasn't completely alone. That night, she sat on the bed, her laptop open, staring at photos from the past. Their honeymoon in Santorini, the anniversary dinner where Ethan surprised her with a diamond necklace. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, her finger trembling over the delete button. But she couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, she opened a blank document and began to write. "To my baby, who saved me without even being born." In Seoul, the cold bit harder than expected, and Ethan wrapped his coat tighter around himself as Ivy tugged him through a crowded shopping district. Laughter and lights danced around them, but he barely registered it. She dragged him into a boutique. "Come on," she chirped. "I need your opinion." He watched her twirl in front of a mirror, trying on a designer coat. Her laugh was sharp, calculated. Everything about her was curated, even her love. And suddenly, his heart remembered something. Claire, in the kitchen, barefoot, dancing clumsily to a Sinatra song while she cooked. Her face glowing as she talked about baby names. Her hands always smelling faintly of lavender soap and cinnamon. He blinked, his throat tightening. Ivy looked over her shoulder. "Are you even watching me?" "Yeah. Sorry," he said quickly. "Just distracted." She frowned, walking up to him, eyes narrowing. "You're not over her, are you?" His silence was an answer. Back home, Claire sat in the OBGYN office, alone, watching the sonogram flicker on the screen. The technician smiled kindly. "He's strong," she said. "Healthy heartbeat." Claire blinked rapidly, biting her lip as the sound of her son's heart filled the room. It was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "You hear that?" she whispered to her belly. "That's you. That's us." She walked out of the clinic, clutching the image, her fingers trembling. A young couple passed her, holding hands, laughing. She lowered her eyes quickly. Outside, the snow had started again. That evening, Ethan stood on the balcony of his hotel suite in Seoul, staring at the city lights like they held answers. Inside, Ivy was on the phone, laughing, pacing, already planning another photo shoot, another trip. He gripped the railing tightly. Claire's probably showing by now, he thought. The baby's real. Not a theory, not a distant problem. Real. He tried to imagine her face when she first saw the sonogram. Was she alone? Did she cry? And then, for the first time since he left, he felt something stronger than guilt. Fear. What if she never forgave him? What if the child never knew him? What if, in chasing freedom, he had walked away from the only real thing he'd ever had? He turned abruptly, walking back into the suite. "Ivy," he said, his voice steady. She looked up from the couch, surprised by his tone. "What?" "I need to go back." "Back where?" "Home." Her smile faded. "You can't be serious." But Ethan was already reaching for his suitcase. He hadn't stood in front of this house in months. The last time he left, the air had been thick with Claire's sobs and the ghost of their broken vows. But now it was quiet, peaceful, almost holy, and it scared him more than any boardroom war or hostile takeover ever had. "Sir?" the driver asked gently. Ethan blinked. "Yeah, sorry." He stepped out, his expensive leather shoes crunching against the icy driveway. His breath formed pale clouds in the air. He looked up at the window, her window, and imagined Claire inside, maybe rocking gently in her chair, maybe humming to the baby growing inside her. Would she even open the door? He stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned away, not out of cowardice, but because something told him she didn't need words from him right now. She needed space, time, proof. Back in the city, he checked into a modest hotel far from his usual choices. No penthouse, no marble floors. Just a simple room with peeling wallpaper and a window that overlooked nothing. Felt right. The next morning, Ethan walked into a small co-working space downtown, and rented a desk under a fake name. He needed anonymity, needed to remember who he was without the title, the power, the walls of glass and steel. He needed to strip himself bare. He spent days there, researching, making calls, looking for projects. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about something else, rebuilding. But every night, he'd find himself walking near Claire's neighborhood, just far enough to see the light in her kitchen. He never approached, never knocked. He simply watched. One evening, as he stood across the street, coat wrapped tightly around him, he saw her through the window, standing by the stove. Her hair was pulled back messily, a tea towel over her shoulder, her free hand gently cradling her belly. And then, a moment, she paused, leaning slightly against the counter, her face contorted in pain. He straightened, heart in his throat. But she smiled a second later, talking to someone. A small child's laugh echoed from deeper in the house. No, his heart misheard. There was no child yet. She was laughing. Alone. Or maybe she was pretending for the baby's sake. Either way, it broke him. 1 week later, Claire sat in the quiet of the clinic waiting room again, this time fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. The doctor had requested a follow-up, nothing serious, but her nerves betrayed her calm. She felt eyes on her, the receptionist glancing up from time to time with that soft pity people always reserve for women attending appointments alone. She hated it. When her name was called, she stood slowly, cradling the small bump beneath her coat. But as she turned, she stopped. Across the room, Ethan. Claire froze mid-step. He was standing by the entrance, as if unsure whether to come in or run away. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the entire world melted into that one impossible second. She turned her face away and walked past him, straight into the hallway. Inside the exam room, she sat down heavily. Her hands shook, and her throat burned. The door creaked open moments later. It wasn't the doctor. It was him. Claire! His voice cracked on her name. She didn't look at him. He stepped inside, shutting the door gently behind him. I didn't come to cause trouble. I've been in town. I've been close. Just didn't know how to say what I need to say. She finally turned toward him, eyes burning. You said enough the day you left. Ethan swallowed hard. I know, and I've thought about that moment every single day. Really? She said coldly. Did you think about it in Seoul? Or in Paris? Or wherever she took you next? His breath caught. Ivy's gone, he said quietly. She left when the money stopped. She never wanted me. She wanted the empire I pretended to be. Claire stared at him, her expression unreadable. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't expect that, he continued, stepping forward. But I needed to see you, to see if you're okay. She stood, slowly. You needed to see me? Like I'm a loose end you never tied up. No, he said firmly, desperate now. I needed to see the woman I hurt. I needed to tell her that I see it now. Everything I destroyed. She laughed bitterly. You destroyed a marriage. You destroyed a future. And this? She placed a hand on her belly. You walked away from this before it even had a name. He lowered his head. I'm sorry for everything. I don't need your apology, Ethan, she said, tears trembling in her voice. I needed you when I was sick with morning nausea, when I cried alone at night, when I went to the first ultrasound and heard his heartbeat. You weren't there. You chose not to be. I was a coward, he admitted. I was selfish and blind, but I want to be here now, not just for him, but for you, for whatever you'll allow me to be. Claire wiped her tears, her breath shaky. You can't just walk back in and erase what happened. I know, he said softly. The door opened again. The real doctor this time. Claire stepped aside, composing herself. We'll talk later, she said quietly, not as a promise, but not as a rejection either. Ethan nodded, his chest tight. That night, as snow fell once more, Claire sat alone in the nursery she had slowly started to decorate. She held the new sonogram image in her lap, her son's tiny fingers clearly visible now. Her eyes drifted to the door. She hadn't said no, but she hadn't said yes either. Ethan meanwhile, sat in his car down the street, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. He had seen his son, not his face, but his outline, the pulse of life he had once turned his back on. And now he would wait. He would stay in the shadows as long as it took. He was still out there. Ethan. She hadn't seen him since the clinic, but she had felt him. Somehow, she always knew when he was near. He never approached, never knocked, but he lingered, like a ghost of the life they were supposed to have had together. It terrified her how part of her waited for him anyway. A knock at the door broke the silence. Gentle, hesitant, her pulse spiked. She moved cautiously down the hallway, feet silent on the hardwood floor, heart heavy with dread and a flicker of hope she wished she didn't have. She opened the door slowly, prepared for anything. But it wasn't Ethan. It was her sister, Madeline, bundled in a thick coat and holding a brown paper bag. "I brought breakfast," she said with a smile, though her eyes studied Claire carefully. "And backup, just in case today's a bad one." Claire stepped aside, suddenly aware of how tightly she'd been holding her breath. "I'm fine," she lied. Madeline raised an eyebrow. "You always say that when you're not." They settled in the kitchen, the smell of warm croissants and eggs filling the air. Claire tried to smile, tried to make it feel normal, but the silence kept circling back. "He's been around," Madeline said gently, breaking the quiet. "Ethan." Claire's hand stilled on her fork. "I've seen the car," she said, her voice thin. "And?" Her sister pressed softly. Claire stared at her plate. "And nothing. He doesn't knock. He just watches." "Do you want him to?" Claire closed her eyes. "I don't know what I want anymore." Madeline reached out, covering Claire's hand with her own. "I do. I think you want to hate him, but you can't, because you loved him, because you still love him." Claire's throat tightened. "I don't trust him," she whispered. "What if he leaves again? What if my son loves him and then he just disappears?" Madeline nodded. "Then he'll have to prove that he won't." That night, the black sedan was back, parked just down the street, headlights off, barely visible in the drizzle. Claire stood in the living room, lights dim, curtains half drawn, staring at him like he was some unfinished sentence at the end of a long, aching letter. And then, without knowing why, she opened the door. She stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself, the cold biting at her skin. Ethan stepped out of the car slowly, like he didn't believe what was happening. He stood at the edge of the walkway, water pooling around his shoes. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't turn away. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady. He looked at her, soaked, eyes red with exhaustion. "Because I can't stay away. You had no problem doing it before." "I was a coward," he said, the words cutting through the rain. "I thought love was supposed to be easy. I didn't know how to stay when it got hard." Claire swallowed. Her hands trembled, but she hid them in her sleeves. "And now I know staying is the only thing that means anything." He took a cautious step forward. "I don't expect you to let me back in. I just want to be near, to show you I've changed. Even if it takes months, years, I'll wait." Claire looked down, her vision blurring. "He kicks when I sing to him," she said quietly. "Every night." Ethan's breath caught. "What do you sing?" "Old lullabies my mother used to sing." Sometimes he reacts, like he knows. "I want to know him," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I want to know both of you, even if you never forgive me." Claire blinked back tears, her heart screaming from the weight of it all. "You broke everything," she said. "You didn't just leave. You erased us." "I know," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it." She turned away, the cold creeping into her bones. "Come back tomorrow," she said without looking at him. "In the daylight." Ethan stood still, stunned, then nodded slowly. "I will." She stepped back inside, closed the door gently, and leaned against it, her hand pressed to her chest. She wasn't ready, but something had shifted. The next morning, Ethan arrived just as the sun was rising. holding a bag of groceries in one hand and a bouquet of pale yellow tulips in the other. Claire's favorite. He hesitated for a full minute before ringing the bell. The door opened faster than he expected. Claire stood in the doorway, dressed in a loose sweater, her hair tied back, eyes tired but open. She looked at the tulips, then back at him. "You remembered." He nodded, nervous. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked in slowly, every step feeling like a mountain. The house smelled the same. Warm, clean, faintly of cinnamon. But it was quieter now. Quieter than it used to be. In the kitchen, she placed the flowers in a vase. He unpacked the groceries, eggs, fruit, tea. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know. I wanted to." They worked in silence. For a few minutes, it almost felt like old times. Almost. When they sat down to eat, Claire looked at him carefully. "I'm not going to let you near him just because you brought groceries. I don't expect that. You don't get to waltz back in and pretend nothing happened. I know." Her voice dropped, trembled. "But I'm tired. So tired of hating you. It's like carrying a stone in my chest every day." Ethan's voice broke. "Then let me carry some of it." Claire's eyes filled. "You don't get to be the hero, Ethan." "I'm not trying to be," he said. "I just want to be someone he's not ashamed to call father." Silence. Then, Claire reached into a drawer and pulled out a small photo, the latest sonogram. She handed it to him without a word. Ethan stared at it, eyes wide, breath shaking. He touched the image with trembling fingers. "That's him." Claire nodded. "Your son." Ethan's shoulders collapsed with emotion, tears slipping down his face as he whispered, "He's beautiful." Claire looked away, wiping her own eyes. "He deserves better than what we had." "Then let's give him something better," Ethan said. "Even if it's just peace." One afternoon, while the air outside was thick with the scent of early spring rain, Claire found herself sitting at the kitchen table, watching Ethan from the window. He was outside, wiping down the porch railing, careful and focused, like even the smallest gesture needed to be earned. Her fingers moved over her stomach. "He's not running," she whispered to her baby. "Not this time." She didn't know how to feel about that. Inside, Ethan's world had become smaller and quieter. He'd sublet his apartment in the city. He'd walked away from 3 business meetings that could have revived his reputation, but he didn't care. He didn't want conference rooms or glossy contracts. He wanted Claire to smile again. He wanted to be someone his son would be proud of. Someone who showed up. Still, every moment around her felt fragile, like he was moving through a room filled with glass. She didn't speak much, didn't laugh, but sometimes he'd catch her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, and that was enough. Until one evening, things shifted. It was late. The house was quiet, bathed in soft lamplight. Claire had fallen asleep on the couch, her feet propped up, a baby book open across her belly. Ethan was in the kitchen, carefully repackaging leftovers he had made. A simple stew, nothing fancy, but it had made her eat more than she had in weeks. He glanced over and smiled. But then the door creaked, and her eyes fluttered open. "You should go," she said, sitting up slowly. "I can finish this." "No," she said, firmer now. "You should go." He hesitated, searching her face. "Did I do something wrong?" She looked at him for a long, painful second, and he saw it. All of it. The weight, the fear, the walls she'd built to survive. "I can't let you back in," she whispered. "Not all the way, because if I do and you leave again, it'll kill me." He crossed the room slowly, but didn't touch her. He knelt in front of her like a man in prayer. "I won't leave. You said that before," she said, her voice breaking. "On our wedding day, remember? You held my hands, and you said you'd never walk away. But you did." "I was a different man then," he whispered. "I didn't understand the cost of my own choices. But now, I live with it every day." She looked away, her jaw trembling. "I used to wait by the window, hoping you'd come home. Even after I found out about Ivy, I still hoped." His breath caught. "Claire, Do you know what it's like to feel invisible to the person you love most in the world? He closed his eyes. I do now. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. Then, slowly, carefully, Claire reached into her sweater pocket and handed him something. A small key. He looked at it, confused. That's for the side shed, she said. There's an old crib in there. Needs fixing. Ethan looked up, eyes wide, emotion swelling in his chest. You want me to? I want to see if you mean what you say, she said softly. I want to know that when this baby comes, you'll already be part of his world. His hands closed tightly around the key, as if it were the most precious thing he'd ever held. I will, she nodded. Then, after a long pause, good night, Ethan. He stepped out into the night air, his heart beating like it hadn't in years. The shed was dark and dusty, filled with forgotten boxes and broken garden tools. But in the corner stood the crib, old wooden, worn but beautiful. He ran his fingers along the edge, imagining tiny hands gripping the bars one day. He spent days restoring it, sanding, sealing, rebuilding. His hands blistered, his clothes smelled of paint and sawdust. And for the first time in his life, the work made him feel clean. One afternoon, as he stood back to admire the finished crib, Claire appeared at the door. She said nothing, just stepped inside and walked toward it. She touched the polished wood, then looked at him. You built something, she murmured. You stayed. He nodded, breath unsteady. I want to keep building. She held his gaze for a long time. Then, quietly, she reached for his hand and held it. Later that night, sitting together on the porch with the cool wind brushing against their skin, Claire whispered, Do you ever think about who we were before everything fell apart? Ethan nodded. I used to pretend we were still those people, but I don't want to go back to who I was. I want to move forward with you, if you'll let me. Claire's eyes shimmered under the porch light. We're not the same, she said. I'm not the girl who believed in fairy tales. I've seen what silence does to love. I'm not asking for a fairy tale, Ethan said gently. Just a chance to tell our son that his mother is the strongest person I've ever known, and that I was lucky enough to love her. Claire looked down, brushing a tear from her cheek. Her hand slipped into his again. I don't know if we'll make it, she said. I do, Ethan said, because this time, I'm not going anywhere. She reached for her coat, then paused at the mirror. There was a woman looking back at her whom she barely recognized. Stronger, yes, wiser, but tired. Her eyes held a storm behind them, even when her lips were still. Every day she tried to live one step ahead of the memories. Every day she told herself she didn't need to believe in anything anymore, except her child. A soft knock broke the silence. She turned toward the door, already knowing it was him. When she opened it, Ethan stood there holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. His coat was damp from the rain, his eyes shaded with something unspoken. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her like he was afraid she'd close the door again. I wanted to give you something, he said finally, offering the box. Claire hesitated, then took it. The wrapping crinkled in her hands as she untied it. Inside was a set of hand-carved wooden blocks, each etched with a letter of the alphabet, carefully smoothed and finished. They smelled faintly of cedar. She traced her finger over the letter L. I made them, he said quietly. For him. Claire's throat tightened. He doesn't have a name yet, she whispered. I know, Ethan said, but I wanted to give him something before he gets here. Something made by my hands. Not my money, not my reputation, just me. She looked up at him then, and he wasn't the same man she once begged not to leave. He wasn't the cold stranger who walked away, but she still didn't know if he was someone she could trust. I don't know who you are anymore, she said, her voice breaking. Some days I think you mean every word. Other days, I wonder if you're just trying to undo the guilt. He nodded slowly, not trying to fight it. Maybe it started that way, but it's not guilt that keeps me coming back. It's hope. Claire looked down at the blocks in her hands. They were imperfect, a little crooked, a little rough around the edges, but they were real. She stepped aside. "You can come in for a little while. I have a doctor's appointment later." Ethan's eyes widened, just slightly. "Would it be okay if I went with you?" Her guard rose instantly, but before she could answer, he added quickly, "Just to sit in the waiting room. I won't ask for more than that." She hesitated. Her heart pulled in opposite directions, between the safety of solitude and the fragile longing to not be alone for this. "Fine," she said, "but don't make me regret it." The waiting room was quiet, with soft classical music playing overhead and the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. Claire sat with her hands folded over her belly, her face calm but distant. Ethan sat beside her, his legs bouncing nervously. He had never been in this space before. Not for their first appointment. Not for the first heartbeat. Not for the milestones she had whispered about alone. Now he was here, and everything he had missed pressed on him like weight. Claire said nothing, but when her name was called, she stood, and, to his surprise, looked back at him. "Well?" she said. "Are you coming?" Ethan stood quickly, his heart racing. Inside the exam room, he kept his hands folded tightly in front of him, afraid to touch anything. The doctor smiled warmly, unaware of the tension humming beneath every breath between them. Claire lay back on the table, lifting her shirt to reveal the gentle curve of her belly. The machine buzzed softly as the gel was applied, and then the heartbeat. Fast, strong, steady. Ethan's eyes welled. Claire turned her head just slightly toward him. She didn't speak, but something in her gaze softened, just a little. "There he is," the doctor said, smiling. "Looks healthy, growing well." Ethan swallowed hard. His voice trembled. "That's him." Claire nodded slowly. "Yes, that's our son." For the rest of the appointment, Ethan didn't move. He barely breathed. He simply watched the screen, watched the rhythm of a life he had once turned away from, and now couldn't stop hearing in his soul. Later, as they walked out into the crisp afternoon, Claire paused on the steps of the clinic. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low, but a single ray of sunlight slipped through, brushing across her face. She turned to him. "Why now, Ethan?" He blinked. "What do you mean? Why show up now? After everything? Why didn't you come back sooner?" He took a breath. "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I had ruined everything beyond repair. And I was afraid that even if I came back, you wouldn't look at me the way you just did." Claire looked away, her arms wrapping around herself. "I still don't know if I can trust you." "I'll earn it," he said. "Every day, every breath. And if I never give it back?" He nodded. "Then I'll still stay. Because even if you never let me in again, our son deserves a father who didn't give up." She said nothing, but for the first time, she didn't walk ahead of him. She walked beside him. That night, Claire sat in the nursery, the soft light from the lamp casting long shadows across the floor. The wooden crib Ethan had restored stood proudly in the corner, and beside it, the box of blocks. She opened the lid and took one out. Her fingers traced the letter again. Lucas. The name slipped quietly into her thoughts, uninvited but not unwelcome. "Lucas," she whispered aloud. The baby kicked. Claire gasped softly and laughed through the tears that filled her eyes. Somewhere in the night, she knew things were changing. Maybe not fixed, maybe not healed. The nursery door creaked open slowly behind her. Ethan stepped in, dripping wet, his jacket soaked through, a worried expression carved into every line of his face. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly, seeing the stiffness in her posture. "The roads were flooding. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She turned to him, her voice calm but cold. "I didn't call you." "I know," he said, removing his jacket carefully, hanging it over the doorknob. "But I needed to see for myself." Claire watched him for a moment, then turned back to the counter. "You can't keep showing up just because it rains." "I know," he said again, "but I didn't know where else to be." That answer hung in the air for a moment, quiet, aching. She busied herself pouring tea, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't need saving. I didn't come to save you, Claire. Then why are you really here? He stepped closer, unsure how much space she would allow. Because I'm scared. She paused, her fingers tightening around the cup. He continued, slower now. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had stayed away, if I hadn't come back when I did, if something had gone wrong at the clinic, or if the baby had. He stopped himself, swallowing hard. I don't want to be a bystander in your life. Not anymore. Claire finally turned to face him. You already were. For 3 years. He nodded, accepting the weight of that truth. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it, if you let me. She searched his face for signs of old lies, old shadows. But what she saw now was different, raw, stripped of pride. I've built something without you, she said. Brick by brick, day by day. I raised this child inside me without your name, without your help. I made a world where he would never have to wonder why his father didn't want him. I want him, Ethan said, his voice cracking. I need him. Claire's throat burned. What happens when the world wants you back, Ethan? What happens when business calls? When Ivy tries again? When your comfort becomes more important than your promises? I lose everything, he said firmly, because nothing matters more than this, than you, than him. Silence. The rain softened against the window. Claire slowly walked to the small table in the corner of the kitchen, where a binder sat open. She pulled it toward her and flipped through the pages until she landed on one she had stared at for weeks. The birth plan. She slid it across the table to him. This doesn't mean anything yet, she warned. This isn't an invitation to stay. It's a test. Ethan looked down. His name was handwritten beside the word, support partner. For a second, he forgot to breathe. I'll be there, he whispered. You'll come to every class, she said, her voice trembling now. You'll hold my hand, not just when the cameras are on, or when it's easy, but when I'm screaming, when I'm terrified, when I don't know if I can do it anymore. I will. You'll answer when I call. I will. You'll stay even if I ask you to leave. I will. Claire's lips quivered. You left me when I was 4 months pregnant. I know, he said, stepping closer, his eyes glassy. And I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to believe that people can come back. And mean it. She took a shaky breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then prove it. Ethan reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. She didn't pull away. The weeks that followed were full of small beginnings. Ethan accompanied Claire to the birthing classes, sitting silently but attentively beside her, his notebook open, filled with nervous handwriting. He asked too many questions. He took too many notes. He apologized when he got the breathing rhythm wrong. And Claire watched him. One day, as they practiced swaddling baby dolls in the class, Claire broke into quiet laughter at the sight of Ethan trying to tie the wrap with the seriousness of a man defusing a bomb. He looked up, surprised. She was laughing, really laughing. He smiled softly, unable to look away. That night, back at the house, as Claire folded real baby clothes into neat piles, Ethan asked quietly from the doorway, "Do you ever think about what his first words will be?" She glanced at him, her hands pausing. "Sometimes. I hope they're not 'Where's Dad?'" he said quietly. Claire met his gaze. "That depends on you, doesn't it?" He nodded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I swear it. But fate has a way of testing even the strongest vows." Came with a phone call. Ethan stood on the porch one afternoon, Claire napping upstairs, the breeze rustling through the garden she had built from nothing. The call came from his old company. A merger had fallen through. The press was circling. They needed him, urgently. It would only take a few days, they said. Fly to Seoul, meet with the board, fix what only he could fix. Ethan stared at the phone in his hand, his blood turning cold. He thought of Claire, of her trust barely blooming, of the child inside her so close now to entering the world. And the old voice returned, the one that whispered of legacies, of purpose, of power. He closed his eyes and pressed decline. That evening, he placed his phone in a drawer and joined Claire on the couch, her head resting lightly against his shoulder, her breathing soft and even. He didn't tell her about the call. Not yet, because for the first time, he had made a decision not for the world. Ethan was on the couch, laptop open but forgotten, eyes drifting toward her every few minutes like he needed to keep reminding himself she was really there, that he was really there. He noticed her struggling to lift one of the bins. "I've got it," he said quickly, setting the laptop aside and kneeling beside her. "I can do it," she replied quietly but firmly. "I know, but let me." Their hands brushed for a second as he took the bin. The contact lingered longer than either of them meant it to. "Thanks," she said after a pause, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Ethan set the bin down carefully and sat beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The soft ticking of the wall clock was the only sound between them. Then Claire looked at him. Really looked. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said, bracing himself. "Why didn't you ask about the name I picked?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't want to assume it was something I had a say in." She tilted her head, studying him. "You still don't really know where you stand with me, do you?" He offered a sad smile. "I know I'm here. That's all I know for sure." She reached for a small card on the table and handed it to him. It was a hospital pre-admission form. In the field marked baby's name, the word Lucas was written in soft blue ink. Ethan read it silently, then looked up at her. "I love it," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Lucas. I chose it the night he kicked while I was whispering to him," she said, almost in a whisper herself. "It just felt right." He nodded, unable to look away from the name. "It is right." Claire leaned back on her hands, breathing carefully. "I almost didn't tell you. I almost kept everything, his name, his face, all of it, to myself. Out of spite." "I wouldn't blame you," Ethan said softly. "But I'm glad you didn't." "I'm still scared," she said, her voice breaking a little now. "I'm scared of what happens when he grows up. What I'll say when he asks where you were." Ethan's jaw tensed. "You'll tell him I was lost, and that I found my way back. What if he hates you for it?" "Then I'll let him," Ethan whispered, "and I'll keep showing up anyway, until he sees who I've become." A silence fell again, but this time it felt different, heavier, almost sacred. Then Claire slowly stood, placing a hand against her back. "I need to lie down for a bit." Ethan stood too, ready to help, but she waved him off gently. "I'm okay." He watched her walk up the stairs, one hand on the railing, the other on her belly. "Lucas." He whispered the name again when she was gone. Tasted like something precious, like a second chance. The next morning brought clouds. Not the soft kind that threatened drizzle, but thick, low-hanging ones that choked the sky. Ethan brewed a fresh pot of coffee while Claire sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes scanning the horizon like she was looking for something she couldn't quite name. He brought her a mug and sat beside her. "You're quiet today," he said carefully. "I had a dream last night," she murmured. "You were holding Lucas, and then you just walked into the sea with him. You didn't look back." Ethan's stomach turned. She didn't meet his eyes. "It wasn't real," she added quickly, "but it felt real. Too real. I would never—" "I know," she said, cutting him off, "but sometimes I still remember who you were. The version of you that left." He exhaled slowly. "I do too, and I hate him." They sat in silence again. Then Claire asked, quietly, "Was she worth it?" It was a knife in his chest, but he didn't flinch. "No," he said, "not even close." Claire's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. "I didn't leave for her," he added. "I left because I didn't know who I was anymore, and instead of fixing it, I ran. She just gave me somewhere to hide." Claire nodded slowly, absorbing every word. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance. "I've been having Braxton Hicks contractions more often," she said suddenly. "They're getting stronger." Ethan straightened. "Should we call the doctor?" "No," she said. "Not yet. I can still breathe through them. But it's close. I can feel it." He nodded, trying not to let panic show on his face. "Okay, then I'll be ready." She turned to him, finally meeting his gaze. "You weren't ready the first time." "I wasn't," he admitted. She held his gaze for a long time, then whispered, "Don't let me down again, Ethan. Not now." He reached for her hand, slowly, deliberately. She didn't pull away. "I won't," he said. "Not this time. Not ever again." That night, a storm rolled through, lightning flashing across the sky, wind rattling the windows. Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, listening to the rain, until he heard the creak of the stairs. Claire appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her hand gripping the frame. "Ethan," she said, her voice shaking. "It's time." His heart dropped. "Now?" She nodded. "The contractions are real this time. They're close." He jumped up, his adrenaline rushing. Okay, I'll get the bag. I'll call the hospital." Claire, breathe." "I am breathing," she snapped, clutching her belly. He grabbed the hospital bag, threw on a hoodie, and helped her down the stairs. But just as they reached the door, Claire stopped, doubling over in pain. "Breathe through it," he said, crouching beside her. "I've got you. We've got this." Claire gripped his arm hard. "I'm scared." "So am I," he said, voice breaking. "But we're going to do this together." The storm raged outside, and as they stepped into the night, a strange peace washed over them. He had read every article, watched every video, taken every class, but nothing prepared him for the sheer helplessness of waiting, knowing she was in there alone with pain he couldn't carry for her. A nurse walked by. Ethan rushed forward. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice trembling. "Is the baby okay?" "She's progressing," the nurse said kindly. "We'll let you in soon. The doctor's with her now." He nodded, but it didn't ease the pressure in his chest. He sat on the bench, head in his hands, heart thudding like thunder. "Please be okay. Please, both of you, just be okay." The door opened moments later, and a young nurse peeked out. "You can come in now." Ethan jumped to his feet, nearly stumbling as he rushed through. Inside, Claire lay in the hospital bed, drenched in sweat, her breathing labored. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her hands clenched tightly around the bed rails. "Claire," he breathed, stepping toward her. She opened her eyes slowly, and for a brief moment, just one, relief passed through her expression. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. He took her hand, and she didn't let go. "You're doing amazing," he whispered, leaning close, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "I'm here. I'm right here." She gritted her teeth through another contraction, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. "It hurts so much." "I know," he said, voice breaking. "I wish I could take it from you." "You should have," she choked out. "You should have been here the whole time." "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'll carry every pain from now on. Just not this one. But I'll be here for every breath, every scream, every second." She gripped his hand tighter, and this time, her tears weren't just from the pain. The doctor entered. "We're almost there, Claire. A few more pushes." She nodded weakly, exhaustion painting her face pale. "Claire," Ethan whispered again, forehead against hers. "He's almost here." "Lucas," she murmured. "I want to see Lucas." Ethan blinked back the flood in his eyes. "You will. So soon." Another contraction came. Claire screamed, her body writhing, her hand crushing Ethan's. "Push, Claire," the doctor instructed. "You're doing beautifully. Just one more." She pushed with everything she had. Her voice cracked, her eyes squeezed shut, and then crying. A newborn's first, raw, terrified wail. The room filled with movement. Nurses rushing, the doctor smiling, the cry echoing louder and louder as the baby was lifted into the light. Ethan's breath stopped. Claire's eyes opened wide. "Is he okay?" she gasped. "Is he—" "He's perfect," the doctor said gently. "He's perfect, Claire." A nurse laid the small, wriggling baby on her chest. Claire sobbed as she reached for him, her arms trembling, her face crumpling in disbelief and wonder. Hi, baby," she whispered, voice shattered with emotion. "Hi, Lucas." Ethan leaned over, his hand gently brushing his son's tiny fingers. The baby's eyes fluttered shut against his chest. Claire looked up at him. "He's ours," she said. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Later, in the quiet of the recovery room, Claire lay propped against pillows, Lucas asleep in her arms. The lights were dim. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only a steady patter of rain against the windows. Ethan sat beside her, silent. His eyes hadn't left the baby for more than a few seconds since he entered the world. "He looks like you," Claire whispered, brushing Lucas's cheek. "I think he has your mouth," Ethan said softly. "And your hands." She smiled faintly, her exhaustion still visible but softened by joy. "I didn't think I'd feel this," she murmured. "Not with you beside me. Not after everything. I didn't think I'd be worthy of this," Ethan replied. "Of you. Of him." Claire looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You still have a lot to prove." "I know," he said, "but I'm not running. I'll never run again." She paused, then glanced back at Lucas. "Do you want to hold him?" His eyes widened slightly, as if the offer was too fragile to be real. "Me?" Claire nodded, gently lifting the baby and placing him in Ethan's arms. He cradled Lucas with both hands, clumsy but careful, as if the child were made of light and porcelain. Lucas squirmed, gave a tiny sigh, and settled into his chest. Ethan laughed softly, the sound choked by emotion. "He's so small. You were gone when he started growing," Claire said, her voice low. "Now he's here, and you're here. But I still don't know what we are." Ethan looked at her, eyes shining. "Whatever you'll let us be." She said nothing, but she didn't ask for him to give Lucas back. That night, when Claire fell asleep, Ethan stayed awake, holding his son in the chair by the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The city was quiet. He looked down at the baby's face, then whispered words he hadn't said aloud to anyone before. "I almost missed you. I almost lost this. But I'm not going anywhere, Lucas. Promise. You'll never have to wonder where I am. I'll be right here." Lucas stirred in his arms, then drifted deeper into sleep. Ethan sat silently in the corner, unshaven, eyes swollen from lack of sleep and emotion. He hadn't left the room all night, not even to get coffee. His gaze hadn't left them. A nurse stepped in quietly, clipboard in hand. "Good morning," she whispered, smiling softly as she noticed the peaceful scene. "How are they?" Ethan stood and walked over, lowering his voice. "They're okay. She's exhausted. He's perfect." The nurse nodded. "The doctor will come by soon to check on her. But everything in the file looks good. You're all clear to go home later today." Ethan glanced back at Claire and Lucas. "Home?" he echoed, as if the words still felt foreign in his mouth. The nurse left, and the room fell silent again. Claire stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she looked confused. Then her gaze settled on Lucas, and everything softened. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. "I didn't want to," Ethan replied, approaching slowly. "I couldn't stop watching him. Watching you." She studied him for a moment. "You look like you've aged 5 years." He smiled, though it was thin and tired. "That's because I feel like I've lived 5 lifetimes in the last 3 days." Claire shifted, wincing slightly from the soreness in her body. "Here," Ethan said gently, stepping forward. "Let me take him for a bit so you can rest." She hesitated, eyes scanning his face. Then, with delicate care, she lifted Lucas into Ethan's waiting arms. Ethan cradled him like he was holding the world. "I still don't know how to do this," he said softly. "I don't know how to be good." Claire leaned her head back against the pillow. "Then start by not disappearing." He met her gaze. "I won't," he said. "I swear, Claire, I'm not leaving." "You already did once," she said, the edge of old pain still raw in her voice. "I know," he whispered, "and that memory will haunt me every time I hold him." Every time I hear him cry, every first word, every first step, every night I tuck him in, I'll remember that I almost missed it all. A silence settled again, heavy, but not cold. Claire closed her eyes. You need to be more than a presence, Ethan. You need to be a father. Not just today. Always. He walked slowly around the bed, holding Lucas close, and sat beside her. I want to be everything he needs, he said. Even if you never take me back. Even if you never love me again. I want to be the one he runs to when he falls. I want to be the man who teaches him how to be better than I ever was. She looked at him, eyes wet. You don't get to rewrite the past. You don't get a clean slate just because you showed up at the finish line. I know, he whispered. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I deserve it. Claire reached up, her fingers brushing against Lucas's soft cheek. The baby stirred, his lips puckering in his sleep. Don't make promises to him if you're not ready to keep them, she said quietly. Ethan's arms tightened around the baby. He's already kept me from walking away from myself. That's a promise I'll spend the rest of my life honoring. She didn't reply, but her hand moved toward his, hovering just long enough before it finally rested over his. Together, they looked down at their son. The drive home was quiet. Claire sat in the back seat with Lucas, her hand gently resting on the handle of the baby carrier. Ethan drove slowly, every stop sign and red light an opportunity to glance at her in the mirror. She caught his eyes once, didn't speak, but didn't look away either. The house was warm when they arrived, filled with the faint scent of lavender and clean linen. Everything Ethan had prepared over the last month. Diapers organized, crib polished, blankets washed and folded, was ready. Claire paused in the doorway, overwhelmed. He watched her, uncertain. I didn't want it to feel like I replaced anything, he said. I just wanted it to feel like home. She looked at him, 1,000 emotions flickering behind her tired eyes. It'll take time, she said. But thank you. They moved through the motions quietly, setting Lucas down in his crib, unpacking hospital bags, checking the baby monitor. By the time evening fell, Claire sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, gently rocking as Lucas lay across her chest, asleep again. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching. I should go, he said softly. Claire looked up. Go where? I don't know, he admitted. I didn't want to assume I'd stay here. She looked down at her son, her thumb brushing his tiny hand. You shouldn't assume, she agreed, but you should stay. He stepped inside slowly, unsure of how to move, unsure of what this meant. I'll sleep on the couch, he offered. Claire nodded. You'll wake up for feedings? His eyes softened. Every single one. And when I'm too tired to hold him, I'll hold him for you. And if he cries all night, then I'll cry with him. She studied him, waiting for the hesitation. But it never came. Ethan sat on the floor beside her, close but not too close. He watched Lucas breathe, watched Claire blink through her exhaustion. I almost lost you both, he whispered. And now you're both here. And I don't know how I got this lucky. Claire looked down at Lucas. We're not a family yet, she said softly. I know, Ethan replied, but I'll keep showing up until we are. Claire hadn't said much about what they were, about them, but she let Ethan stay. He never pushed, never crossed invisible lines. He slept on the couch each night, waking up at the slightest sound of Lucas stirring. Sometimes he'd beat Claire to the nursery. Sometimes they met in the hall, both holding back yawns, their eyes finding each other in the dim light with a kind of shared reverence that didn't need words. Then one morning, a soft winter sun spilled across the kitchen table where Ethan stood warming a bottle. Claire entered slowly, still in her robe, her hair messy from a restless night. Hey, he said gently. It's warm, just the way he likes it. She nodded, reaching for it. Their hands brushed again, just briefly. I heard him cry first, she said, smirking faintly. You're slowing down. Just giving you a head start, he teased softly. Claire smiled, but it faded quickly. She looked tired, deep in her bones. Not just from sleepless nights, but from carrying too much for too long. She moved to the couch and sat, cradling Lucas as he latched on to the bottle with quiet hunger. Ethan stayed by the counter, unsure if he should join them. "Ethan," she said suddenly. He straightened. "Yeah." She didn't look up. "You've been good. Better than I expected." He waited, but she didn't continue. He stepped forward slowly. "But," she paused, then whispered, "but I still flinch when I think of you with her." His breath caught. Claire looked up at him, eyes glassy. "I try not to. I try to focus on this, on how you're here now, how you're doing everything right, but some nights, I still see the way you used to walk out without looking back. I still feel the silence you left behind." "I think about it too," he said quietly, sitting across from her, his elbows on his knees. "Every day, I think about how I threw away the best thing I ever had, because I was afraid of becoming something real." Claire swallowed hard. "Do you regret her?" Ethan looked at her. "I regret me." Silence settled like snowfall between them. Lucas stirred, sighing softly, his small fingers gripping the edge of Claire's robe. "He doesn't know any of it," she whispered. "He sees you, and all he knows is that you're warm and safe." "I want to be worthy of that," Ethan said, "even if it takes the rest of my life." Claire looked at him for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, she said, "Would you hold him for a while?" Ethan nodded quickly, rising to take Lucas in his arms. The baby nestled against him naturally, already recognizing the comfort of his father's chest. Claire watched them. A strange ache bloomed in her chest. "You love him," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't think you could." "I didn't know I could either," Ethan said. "Until I saw him, until I held him, until I stayed." Claire leaned her head back on the couch, watching them, father and son, and something inside her cracked open again. Not all at once, not fully, but it was there. Then the doorbell rang. Ethan stood, still holding Lucas. "You want me to?" "No," Claire said quickly, already rising. "I'll get it." She opened the door and froze. Standing there was Ivy, hair perfectly curled, lips painted a shade of red too bright for morning. She wore a long beige coat over a tight black dress. There was no smile on her face, just a calculated calm. Claire's heart thudded. "What are you doing here?" Ivy tilted her head. "Is he here?" Claire stepped out, pulling the door almost closed behind her. "He's not your concern." Ivy raised an eyebrow. "That's rich coming from the woman who made herself invisible the moment he became successful." Claire's face stiffened. "I didn't come out here to trade insults." "No," Ivy said coolly, "but you should know, he left a lot behind when he came running back to your little suburban fairy tale. A lot of people are asking questions. Money, contracts, damage control. He thinks walking away doesn't come with a price." Claire blinked. "You came here to threaten him?" "I came to remind him," Ivy replied, "that the world he abandoned won't let him go so easily, and neither will I." Claire's voice dropped, low and steady. "You don't scare me." Ivy leaned in closer. "Maybe not, but ask yourself how long before he leaves again. When the pressure returns. When Lucas starts crying through the night and you're too tired to be perfect. You think this is redemption? Or just a detour?" Claire's jaw clenched, but she didn't answer. She stepped back and shut the door in Ivy's face. Inside, Ethan had put Lucas down in the crib and was walking toward her, concern written across his face. "Who was that?" he asked. Claire stared at him. It was her. His expression fell. "What did she say?" "She said what people like her always say," Claire replied, walking past him. "That men like you don't change." Ethan didn't follow right away. When he did, he found her in the nursery, sitting beside the crib, watching Lucas sleep. "I'm not him anymore," Ethan said, standing behind her. "But I know it's not enough just to say it. So I'll show it." She didn't look at him, but she didn't ask him to leave either. Her fingers traced the edge of the crib. "She's right about one thing." Ethan waited. "You did leave a lot behind." "I know." And there's a storm coming. I'll face it, he said. No matter how hard, I'll face it with you. For him. Claire turned slowly, finally meeting his eyes. Then don't hide from it, she said. Don't lie. If something's coming, if there's damage, I need to know. Because this isn't just your life anymore. I understand. She took a breath. Then tell me everything. And as Lucas slept between them, Ethan knew this was the beginning of something even harder than forgiveness. This was truth. Claire stood by the window, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon as if the answers might come from the sky. Start talking, she said finally, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through him. Ethan swallowed hard. There's more fallout from when I left everything. My old company's drowning. The board wants answers. Investors are furious. Ivy, she wasn't lying. They're threatening litigation. Claire turned slowly, arms still folded. And if I don't go back and clean it up, he said, voice lower now, they'll go public. They'll drag everything through the media. My disappearance, the affair, the money. And when they find out about you, about Lucas, they'll use that too. She stared at him, eyes unreadable. So go, she said coldly. Fix it. Ethan shook his head. It's not that simple. It is, she snapped, her voice rising. You created this mess. You walked away from that world. And now you want to stay here pretending it doesn't exist. Pretending like that man never lived. I don't want that world anymore, he said, standing now. I want this. You. Him. You can't erase the past, Ethan. But you can't ignore it either. She took a step closer. So what are you going to do? Run back and put out fires? Or stay here and let it burn everything down? He met her eyes, his own full of quiet panic. I'm trying to protect you. No, she said, voice cracking. You're trying to protect yourself from choosing. Silence pressed in between them, louder than any argument could have been. I thought you changed, she whispered. I have. Then prove it. He looked toward the nursery. Claire followed his gaze. What happens when they publish everything? What happens when our son grows up and types your name into a search bar and finds out who you were from someone else? Ethan winced. Tell me you won't let that happen, she said. Tell me you won't hide again. I'll go, he said after a long breath, but only to close it, not to stay, not to rebuild it, just to end it. And what happens if they pull you back in? They won't. You sure? She asked. Because you loved the power, the attention. You loved being the man everyone wanted a piece of. I don't want to be wanted by the world anymore, he said, his voice low and broken. I want to be needed by my son. By you. Claire's expression cracked for the briefest second. Then go, she said. End it. But if you disappear again, if I so much as feel you slipping, don't bother coming back. I won't disappear, he said firmly. Not again. She stepped aside, clearing a path to the door. Then go before I change my mind. Ethan looked at her, looked toward the nursery, then walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt like a scream. The flight to New York was suffocating. Every moment Ethan spent strapped to that seat felt like a betrayal, like he was walking back into the version of himself he had buried. He turned off his phone, stared out the window, imagined Lucas's tiny hands, Claire's tired but trusting eyes, the rhythm of the crib rocking in the quiet of the night. At the conference room downtown, everything smelled of power and desperation. Ivy was already there, seated at the far end of the table, legs crossed, phone in hand, smile sharp enough to draw blood. You showed up, she said without looking at him. I'm not here to stay. Oh, honey, she laughed softly. No one ever really leaves this life. We both know that. Ethan sat down, gaze steady. I'm not the man who used to sit at this table. Then who are you? She asked, finally meeting his eyes. I'm a father, he said, and I'm here to end this. She smirked. We'll see. 3 days passed. Claire barely slept. She held Lucas tighter with every hour that ticked by. She didn't turn on the news, didn't open her email, but she checked her phone. Again, and again, and again. Nothing. And just like that, the fear crept in. The same old fear. The ache in her ribs. The sharp sting in her throat. He left again. Then, on the fourth morning, just as the sky began to lighten and Lucas stirred in her arms, the front door opened. She stood in the hallway, breath caught. Ethan stepped inside. His coat was soaked, his eyes red, his jaw tense. A duffel bag hung over his shoulder. He looked thinner, tired, but he was there. She didn't say a word. He dropped the bag, stepped forward, and knelt in front of her. "It's over," he whispered. "I signed everything away. Every share, every title. They can have it all." Claire stared at him, trembling. "I came back," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't disappear." He hadn't said much since coming back. Just that he'd let it all go, every connection to the life that had nearly destroyed them. But she needed to know more than that. She needed to see if he still felt it, if he missed it, if a part of him still longed for the chaos. Because if he did, she wouldn't survive it a second time. Lucas stirred in the crib beside her, making soft grunts in his sleep. She reached out instinctively, resting a hand on his chest, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. The bedroom door creaked open. Ethan stood there wearing one of his old sweaters. The kind he used to wear back when they still had late breakfasts and held each other for no reason. His eyes were bloodshot, but not from exhaustion, from relief. "Is it okay if I come in?" he asked gently. Claire nodded once, not speaking. He walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away from her. His voice was almost a whisper. "I didn't know how heavy it was until I put it down." She looked at him, uncertain. "The company? Everything. The mask. The performance. That man I used to be. I thought he made me strong. But all he did was hide the part of me that felt like home." Claire looked back down at Lucas. "And now I want to build something that doesn't need hiding. Not from you. Not from him. Not from myself." He walked to the crib and stared down at his son. Lucas twitched in his sleep, his little mouth forming tiny O's. "I missed him," Ethan said, his voice catching. "I was gone for 4 days, and I missed him so much I couldn't breathe." Claire's voice was low, almost fragile. "I thought you might not come back. I was afraid you'd think that," he said, turning to face her. "And I didn't blame you. I had to fight every voice in my head telling me I wasn't worth coming back to." She stood, slowly, still watching him. "You left a storm behind, Ethan. You didn't just walk out, you let everything unravel. And it left a mark on both of us." "I know," he said, "and I'll never undo that pain. But if you'll let me, I want to walk through the aftermath with you. Not ahead, not behind. With you." Claire looked at him, heart pounding in her chest. "You said you let it go. But what does that mean?" "It means they got everything," he said. "The money, the equity, my name off every building. I don't even own my old office chair anymore." He smiled, a little bitter, a little free. "But I got to keep my name, my son. And maybe someday, I'll earn the right to have you again too." She took a breath, shaky, unsure of what to say. Then, "What about her?" He didn't hesitate. "She's gone. For good. That door isn't just closed. It's locked. And I threw away the key." Claire stepped forward, slowly, as if testing the ground beneath her with every movement. "I've been trying to believe in you again," she said. "And part of me does. But I need something more than promises, Ethan. I need to know you won't lose yourself the moment life gets hard again." "I won't," he said, "because now, when things get hard, I have something to fight for. I never did before." She stopped in front of him, her face inches from his. "You said you came back for us." "I did. Then stay. Don't just be here. Stay in the hard, in the real, in the sleepless nights and the quiet mornings and the ugly days when love feels more like duty than magic." His voice cracked. "I will." Claire stared at him for a moment, eyes glistening. Then she reached up, slowly, and touched his face. And Ethan broke. Not into pieces, but into something new, something whole. His eyes closed, and he leaned into her touch like it was the only solid thing in the world. Claire whispered, "I want to believe in us again." "You can," he said, "one day at a time." She looked over at Lucas, still asleep, still safe. "Then let's start tomorrow." He nodded, his voice no more than air. "I'll be here." Claire was quieter now, but no longer distant. There were soft smiles between diaper changes, brushes of fingers as they passed in the kitchen. The beginning of something they didn't dare name yet. And then one night it all cracked again. It started with Lucas. A sudden, sharp cry, different than his usual hunger or discomfort. Claire jolted upright, heart racing, her body moving before her mind could process. Ethan was already there, lifting Lucas gently from the crib, trying to soothe him, his voice low. "It's okay, little guy. You're okay." Claire reached for the thermometer instinctively. He had a fever, not too high, not dangerous, but enough to flood her chest with panic. Enough to bring back every fear she'd been suppressing since the day he was born. "Call the pediatrician," she said, her voice strained. Ethan didn't hesitate. While he dialed, Claire paced the room, rocking Lucas back and forth, whispering, kissing his forehead again and again. The doctor's voice crackled through the speaker, calm and clinical. "Monitor the fever. Keep him hydrated. If it doesn't drop by morning or if he's not eating, bring him in." Claire nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. After the call ended, Ethan approached, gently touching her shoulder. "He's going to be okay." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What if he's not?" "He will be." But Claire didn't look convinced. She walked to the rocker, holding Lucas tighter. "I can't lose him, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't." "You won't," he said, kneeling beside her. "He's strong, like his mom." She didn't answer. He watched her, helpless. "I used to pray," she said suddenly, her eyes fixed on Lucas. "After you left, every night. I didn't know if I believed in anything anymore, but I still prayed that if I could just carry him to term, if he could just arrive safely, I'd do the rest alone. I was ready to do it alone." "I know you were," Ethan said softly, "and I hate that you had to be. I used to picture you walking back through the door," she continued, her voice distant, "and I'd imagine what I would say, practice it over and over. You're too late. You don't get to come back. But then you did come back, and I didn't say any of it." He rested his hand on her knee. "Because you still loved me?" Claire looked at him, tears finally spilling. "Because I didn't want to be alone anymore." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not now. Not ever." Her eyes locked on his. Desperate. Fragile. "You say that, but what if something goes wrong again? What if this is too much for you?" He didn't blink. "Then I'll break, and I'll stay broken. But I won't run." Claire stared at him, unsure of whether to trust it, unsure of whether she had the strength to risk believing it again. Then Lucas whimpered. She looked down and kissed his head. "He's calming down." Ethan exhaled in relief. "That's good. That's really good." Claire looked back at him. "Why did you really come back, Ethan?" Not the practiced answer. The real one. He took a breath. "Because I woke up one morning in a penthouse suite, next to a woman who didn't know my middle name, and realized I hated the sound of my own heartbeat. I thought I had everything, but I didn't feel anything. And now, he said, voice trembling, I feel everything." He stood slowly, careful not to rush her. "I'm going to get a cool cloth for his forehead." She nodded, holding Lucas tighter, watching Ethan as he disappeared down the hall. When he returned with the cloth, she let him press it gently against their son's skin. His movements were careful, practiced now. Lucas sighed. The fever had started to fall. Claire leaned her head back and closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Ethan knelt beside her again, resting his head lightly against her leg. They stayed like that for a long time. No promises, no future plans. Just love in the form of staying when it's hard, of breathing through fear, of cooling a child's fever in the middle of the night. Claire sat curled up on the couch, a blanket over her legs, her head leaned back, eyes closed but not asleep. Exhaustion weighed in her bones, deeper than physical tiredness. Something ancient, something tied to her heart. Ethan entered the room quietly, 2 mugs in hand. He handed her the chamomile tea without a word and sat beside her, his body close but not crowding. They listened to the soft ticking of the wall clock. For the first time in what felt like years, the house was still. "He's okay," Ethan whispered. "We did it." Claire didn't open her eyes. "For now." He glanced at her, reading the layers of doubt wrapped in her silence. "You don't believe it's real, do you?" She opened her eyes slowly, turning her head to face him. "I believe you're here," she said. "I just don't know how long that version of you will last." "I'm not going anywhere, Claire." She gave a sad smile. "You keep saying that, and maybe you even mean it, but my heart still flinches every time the door opens. Every time your phone rings. Every time I remember how fast love can become absence." Ethan looked down at his hands. "What can I do to fix that?" She shook her head. "It's not about doing, Ethan. It's about being. Being here when nothing's perfect. When there's no script. When I'm tired and resentful and scared. And you don't leave." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I was scared too," he admitted. "Not of you, but of who I was with you. I didn't think I deserved the kind of love you gave me, so I sabotaged it." Claire didn't respond. "Ivy made it easy to forget who I was," he continued, eyes fixed on the floor. "She never asked for more than what I wanted to give. But that wasn't love. That was escape." "And now?" she asked quietly. He looked at her then, eyes red and honest. "Now I want to stay, not because it's easy, not because it feels good every second, but because it hurts to imagine a life where I don't get to see Lucas laugh, or hear you hum while you fold laundry, or sit on this couch beside you." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. "You lost us once. I know. You could lose us again. I won't." Silence stretched again. Then Claire took a deep breath. "He almost had his first fever, without you. I'll never forgive myself for the firsts I missed," Ethan said. "But I'm going to show up for everything that comes after." She stared at him for a long time. Then her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "Move back into the guest room." Ethan blinked. "What?" "I'm not ready for more than this. But I'm also tired of pretending you're not part of this home." Pause. "Then move back in. On my terms." He swallowed, the weight of her words hitting him hard. "I'll earn every inch." "You'd better," she said, "because I won't let you hurt him. Ever. I swear," he said, voice shaking. "I'd rather die than let him feel what you felt." She nodded once. "Then stay. Start from the ground. And don't ask for more than I can give." "I won't." Claire stood and walked toward the window. The light touched her face, softening the sharpness in her jaw. She stood there, silent, watching Lucas sleep. Ethan joined her. "He smiles when he sleeps," he said quietly. Claire gave a small, tired laugh. "Yeah, I noticed." They stood together for a while, watching their son, not speaking. Then Claire said, "Tomorrow we take him out, just a walk through the park. Nothing big." Ethan turned to her, eyes wide. "Really?" She nodded. "He needs to see the world. And maybe we do too." He smiled softly, carefully. "I'd like that." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch when he reached for her hand. She let him hold it. Not a promise. She dressed Lucas slowly, carefully, humming under her breath. The tiniest socks, the tiniest hat. She smoothed the blanket over his body, then paused, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Ethan appeared in the doorway, coffee in one hand, his other nervously clutching the strap of the baby bag he'd packed. "I triple-checked the diapers, bottles, wipes, the spare onesie." He stopped when he saw her smile. "What?" "You look terrified," Claire said. "I am," he confessed. "It's our first time taking him outside. You do realize the world doesn't end when you leave your driveway, right?" He shrugged. I'm not betting on it. Claire rolled her eyes, but her lips curled. Help me with the stroller. They moved together in rhythm, the kind that only forms when two people have been living side by side, quietly sinking over time. The baby seat clicked into place. The blanket was tucked just right. Lucas stirred, blinking sleepily at the sunlight, then settled again, content. As they stepped outside, Claire inhaled sharply. The wind was crisp but gentle, the smell of grass and early flowers fresh in her lungs. She held the stroller handle tightly. Ethan looked at her, sensing her tension. You okay? Claire nodded. It just feels like a big moment. It is. They walked side by side down the sidewalk. Neighbors passed and smiled. A few waved. Claire smiled back, a little stiffly. She hadn't told anyone much about what had happened. About him. Some knew. Others assumed. No one asked directly. But now here they were, her, him, and Lucas together. Outside. Seen. Claire glanced sideways. Do you think they're judging us? Ethan followed her gaze. Maybe, but they don't know the whole story. She scoffed gently. No one ever does. He hesitated, then said, Do you want them to? She stopped walking. He froze beside her. Claire looked at him, really looked. That's not the question that matters. Then what is? She swallowed. Do you know our story? Or are you just playing the part of the man you think I want? He blinked, caught off guard. I know our story, he said softly. I lived it. I ran from it. I wrecked it. And now I'm trying to rebuild it with the truth. Claire studied him, searching for anything false. But his face was bare, unarmored. He stepped closer. Claire, I know you still carry the weight, the memories, the nights I wasn't there, the mornings you woke up alone. Carry them too now, every day. And I want to carry them with you. She lowered her gaze. You weren't there for his first heartbeat. I wasn't, he said quietly. You weren't there when I was scared he might not make it. I know. I wanted you, she whispered, her voice cracking. Even when I hated you, I still wanted you beside me. He looked down, the truth of that pain sinking deeper than it ever had before. Claire turned away, her hands tightening on the stroller handle. I don't want perfect, Ethan. I never did. I just wanted real, honest, present. And you gave all that to someone else. He stepped behind her, placing his hand gently over hers on the handle. I know, and I live with that shame. But every second I get with him now, every second I get beside you, that's me trying to turn my guilt into grace. Claire closed her eyes. I'm scared it won't last. He leaned closer, his voice trembling. So am I. But I'd rather build something honest that hurts sometimes than pretend we're healed when we're not. A long silence passed. Only the wind stirred around them. Then Lucas made a soft noise from the stroller, pulling both their eyes downward. He was watching them, blinking, wide-eyed, unaware of anything except the nearness of their faces and the warmth of the sunlight. Claire reached down and touched his cheek. Ethan mirrored her. He doesn't know what we've been through, she said. Ethan nodded. But he will know what we became. Claire finally turned to face him fully. Then be ready, because I'm not going to hold this family together by myself again. You won't have to, Ethan said. I don't want to be forgiven. I want to be changed. They walked again, slower now, the weight between them shifting. Not gone, but shared. They reached the edge of the park. Children played in the distance. Couples strolled by, laughter drifting through the trees. Claire took a deep breath. Ethan stopped beside her and said, almost in a whisper, You know what I prayed for last night? Claire didn't answer. I prayed that you'd look at me one day and not see the man who left, but the man who stayed. She looked at him, her eyes full of something deep and unfinished. Then stay, she said, through the noise, through the quiet, through the doubt. I will. Lucas stirred again, and they both leaned down instinctively, brushing his blanket, adjusting his cap. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. Claire stood at the bedroom window, the moonlight casting silver patterns across her face. Her arms were wrapped around herself, though the room wasn't cold. Her thoughts were distant, circling somewhere between past and future, between fear and the fragile thing that had started to take shape again, hope. Behind her, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, watching her quietly. "You haven't said much since the park," he said softly. She didn't turn. "There's so much to say," she replied, "and I'm scared to open the floodgates." "I can take it." Claire let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You always say that, until you don't. I mean it this time." She turned around then, her eyes shimmering with something sharp and aching. "Do you know what today meant to me?" He shook his head gently. "It meant I trusted you enough to be seen with you, not just as Lucas's father, but as my—" She stopped herself, the word hanging between them like glass on the verge of breaking. "As someone I might let in again." Ethan rose slowly, his heart in his throat. "Claire!" She stepped forward, her voice rising, not loud, but full of everything she hadn't said until now. "I held this family together while drowning. I cried through doctor appointments. I screamed into my pillow when I couldn't feel him kick. I felt guilt for hating you, and guilt for still loving you. And when you came back, I didn't know whether to run or fall into your arms." He listened, not moving, not daring to interrupt. "And then you stayed," she whispered, "and that terrified me." He stepped closer now, voice thick. "Because if I stay, it becomes real again. Because if you stay and then leave, it'll break something I won't know how to fix." "I won't leave," he said. "I swear to you, Claire, I am here. I am in this. Every sleepless night, every cry, every fight, every ordinary, unremarkable day. I'm not running anymore." Claire looked down, tears slipping silently. "I want to believe that so badly," she whispered. He reached for her hands, holding them gently. "Then let me keep proving it. Not in grand ways, in quiet ways. In the morning coffee, in the 2 a.m. diaper changes, in the small forgiveness between silences." She looked up at him then, really looked, and what he saw in her eyes wasn't just fear. It was longing, and somewhere behind it, the glow of a love not dead, but deeply wounded and still reaching for light. She took a shaky breath. "I still don't know if I can give you my heart." "Then give me your time," he said. "Your mornings, your moments. Let me earn everything else." There was a long pause, the kind of pause that divides a story before and after. Then, softly, Claire whispered, "Do you want to hold him?" Ethan blinked. "Now?" She nodded, moving to the crib. "He's dreaming, but I think he'll know it's you." She lifted Lucas gently, the baby stirring but not waking, and held him out to Ethan. Ethan stepped forward, arms open. Claire placed their son in his hands, then stayed close, closer than she had in weeks. Ethan looked down at Lucas, who squirmed lightly and then stilled again, his small hand wrapping instinctively around Ethan's thumb. Claire watched them, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "He knows you," she said, her voice catching. "I'm his father," Ethan said, barely able to speak. "And I'll never make him doubt that again." Claire moved beside him, their shoulders touching as they both looked down at their child. The moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting a glow across Lucas's tiny face. "I used to picture this," she whispered, "but it always ended with you walking away." Ethan turned his head slowly toward her. "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer right away. Then she leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, they watched their son sleep, together, not as strangers, but as something whole, something healing. Ethan sat cross-legged beside him, stacking soft cloth blocks and making ridiculous faces every time Lucas looked in his direction. The baby squealed, a tiny, breathy laugh that made Ethan freeze. Claire, who had just entered the room with a cup of tea, stopped at the doorway. "That was his first real laugh," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. Ethan looked up, stunned. "It was." Claire nodded, eyes wide. Lucas laughed again, shorter this time, but unmistakable. And just like that, Ethan's face crumpled. A sound escaped him, almost a laugh, almost a sob. He scooped Lucas up gently and held him to his chest. "You laughed, buddy. You laughed." Claire came closer, kneeling beside them. Her eyes were shining. "He's never done that before," she whispered. "I almost missed it," Ethan said, still holding Lucas close. "God, I almost missed everything." Claire reached out and touched Lucas's head, then rested her hand on Ethan's arm. "But you didn't." Ethan turned his head toward her, forehead against hers for a breath. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They just stayed there, Lucas giggling softly between them, the room still except for that sound. And for a few minutes there was only joy. Later that evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table sorting mail. Lucas was asleep. Claire was upstairs, folding clothes. He opened an envelope addressed to him, brows furrowed. His heart dropped. Inside was a formal notice from his former legal team. Ivy had filed for a share of his forfeited business assets, claiming verbal agreements and breach of personal partnership. The company wasn't the only thing she wanted. She was coming for what little he had left. Ethan stared at the paper. His pulse thundered in his ears. He stood quickly, pushed the chair back, and paced. Claire came down moments later and saw the look on his face. "What is it?" He didn't speak at first. "Ethan." He turned to her, holding the letter. "It's Ivy. She's coming after me again." Claire stiffened. "What does she want?" "Everything I left behind," he said, voice low. "And now, whatever I've started to rebuild. She's claiming I promised her things verbally. Contracts, money, control." Claire took the paper, scanned it quickly. "This is real." "Very," he said. Claire's hands trembled slightly. "And if she wins? I could lose the house, the little I have in my name, whatever future I was trying to build here." Claire looked up sharply. "Our home." Ethan's throat tightened. "She can't touch what's yours. But I put my name on that deed again when I came back. I wanted to prove I was committed." Claire stared at him. "And now it's a target." "I'm sorry." "No," she said, stepping back. "Don't say that yet."